In the dead silence of the California night, long after the traffic faded and the city lights dimmed, something else began to stir, something far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. The Night Stalker was not just a criminal. He was a phantom drifting through the shadows, slipping into homes as easily as breathing, leaving behind scenes so horrific that even seasoned detectives struggled to comprehend them. Picture a quiet street, families asleep behind locked doors, unaware that a predator was watching from the darkness just beyond the porch light. In those years, fear became a language spoken in whispers. Doors were barricaded, and children were taught to sleep lightly. This wasn't just a series of crimes. It was the unraveling of an entire city's sense of safety. And as panic rippled through Los Angeles, investigators began to realize that they were not hunting an ordinary killer. They were tracking a monster who followed no rules, no patterns, no logic. This is where our story begins. Los Angeles in the mid-1980s was a restless, electric place, pulsing with ambition, diversity, and chaos. But beneath the glamour, beneath the Hollywood sparkle, a darker current ran through the city. Crime rates were climbing, neighborhoods were changing, and police were already stretched thin when the first whispers of something strange reached their desks. At first, the attacks seemed random, different ages, different neighborhoods, different methods. Nothing made sense. But as the nights grew more violent and the bodies more numerous, detectives started to see the faint outline of a connection forming, something chilling and impossible to ignore. The press didn't know the details yet, but fear was already pushing its way into every living room. People doubled their locks, slept with weapons under their pillows, and peeked nervously out of their windows at every rustle in the dark. It was a city on the brink. Into this storm stepped two men who would become the linchpin of the investigation. Detective Gil Carrillo, young but sharp-minded, and veteran detective Frank Salerno, respected and relentless. They understood that their task wasn't just to catch a killer. It was to restore sanity to a community that felt hunted. Every morning, they pieced through evidence that seemed designed to confuse them. Every evening, more calls came in, more victims, more terror. Still, they kept going, driven by the growing realization that this nightmare would not end on its own. The Night Stalker was evolving, becoming bolder, more unhinged, and more brutal with every attack. And somewhere in the maze of clues, contradictions, and fear lay the one thread that could unravel the identity of the ghost who held Los Angeles hostage. This is the beginning of the Night Stalker Files, an exploration of terror, determination, and the relentless pursuit of a killer who thrived in the darkness. Before fear ever swept through Los Angeles, before doors were triple locked and windows sealed shut, the city lived in a kind of restless comfort. The summer nights of the mid-1980s buzzed with energy cars humming down freeways, neon lights flickering across boulevards, and families lounging on porches to escape the heat inside. It was a time when the city felt unpredictable but not unsafe, chaotic but still familiar. People lived their lives believing that danger existed somewhere else on the harsh edges of the city, in gang territories, in stories whispered on the evening news. What no one knew was that a predator had already slipped quietly into their world. He was watching, studying, learning the rhythm of a city that trusted the night more than it should. In the background, police dealt with rising crime, overworked and under pressure, not yet aware that a new kind of terror was beginning to stir. The early warning signs passed unnoticed: odd break-ins with no clear motive, unexplained acts of violence scattered across different neighborhoods, small moments of brutality that didn't fit neatly into any category. To detectives, these incidents were isolated events, byproducts of a city stretched thin. But to the monster moving through the darkness, they were practice. Each silent entry, each assault, each moment of terror was another step in perfecting his craft. He moved like a shadow, slipping into homes as easily as stepping over a threshold, testing his limits, pushing boundaries of cruelty. And as he grew bolder, the city slept soundly, unaware that its sense of safety was about to be shattered. A storm was coming, a storm born not of nature but of human darkness, and no one was prepared for the night it would arrive. The Night Stalker had begun. The crime that would later be recognized as the Night Stalker's first murder barely made a ripple when it happened. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a breaking story. It was just one more tragedy in a city already troubled by violent crime. The victim, an elderly woman living alone on a quiet residential street, was found brutally murdered in her own home. The scene was disturbing, marked by rage and cruelty, far beyond anything a simple burglary would justify. Yet detectives didn't see a pattern. They saw a senseless act committed by someone passing through, someone desperate, someone untraceable. What they missed was the signature embedded in the brutality, the beginning of a method that the killer himself didn't yet fully understand. The man who committed the murder walked away unseen, vanishing back into the night while the city carried on as if nothing had happened. But inside him, something had awakened. He felt the rush, the chilling sense of control, the intoxicating power of holding another person's fate in his hands. That first kill was the spark that ignited everything that would follow. It fed him. It shaped him. And it taught him a deadly lesson. No one had noticed him. No one suspected him. He was invisible. The police had no leads, no suspects, no idea what kind of darkness they were dealing with. And as the city moved through its daily routines, the killer sharpened his instincts, prowling through neighborhoods at night, studying windows left open, doors left unlocked, families asleep in the comfort of ignorance. He realized that the night belonged to him and that he could move through it like a phantom, seen by no one, feared by no one, until it was far too late. The silence surrounding that first murder would become the foundation of a nightmare. The Night Stalker had taken his first step into infamy. As the month unfolded, a haunting pattern began forming in the dark corners of Los Angeles, though no one recognized it yet. Crimes that seemed unrelated, violent assaults, attempted murders, break-ins filled with terrifying cruelty began occurring across different counties. Each incident was more disturbing than the last, but what puzzled investigators most was the lack of consistency. Serial killers typically follow patterns, age groups, neighborhoods, signature methods. But this predator ignored all the rules. He attacked the elderly, children, couples. He used guns, knives, whatever tools he found inside the home. Sometimes he killed immediately. Other times he tormented his victims. His unpredictability wasn't a flaw. It was his strategy. The randomness made him nearly impossible to track. Survivors who escaped his attacks described a terrifying man-thin frame, wild eyes, rotting teeth, and a presence that felt almost demonic. One survivor recalled him whispering threats in a voice so cold it chilled her blood. Another described the foul smell of him, like decay and sweat. His cruelty was personal, his pleasure obvious. These testimonies unsettled detectives who struggled to connect the dots. The killer seemed to move without logic, leaving behind scenes that felt chaotic yet intentional, violent yet calculated. But among the chaos, one subtle clue began emerging: a footprint. A rare Avia sneaker print left behind at several crime scenes. It was faint, sometimes smudged, sometimes buried under debris, but unmistakable. Still, detectives didn't yet grasp its importance. To them, it was another confusing piece in a puzzle that refused to form. Meanwhile, the killer felt invincible. Each night he wandered streets with growing confidence. Each attack emboldened him. The city was becoming his hunting ground. The shadows were his allies, and the fear he inflicted was beginning to spread. A monster was growing stronger, and Los Angeles had no idea. Inside the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, one detective began noticing what others overlooked. Carrillo, young and intuitive, studied the rising wave of violent crimes and felt something was wrong. He noticed similar signs: brutality, forced entries, Strange behavior patterns, but every time he proposed the idea of a single predator, he was dismissed. His colleagues laughed at the suggestion. They said no killer would attack such different victims, use different weapons, cross different jurisdictions. But Gil couldn't ignore what he saw. His instincts screamed that the city was dealing with something new, something far more dangerous than anyone believed. When he finally presented his theory to veteran detective Frank Salerno, he expected skepticism. Instead, Salerno listened. He had hunted monsters before, the hillside stranglers, and knew that evil didn't always follow rules. If anything, chaos itself could be a signature. The two detectives joined forces, comparing cases across precincts, gathering reports that had been filed separately. What they discovered chilled them. The same footprint appearing across different counties, similar patterns of torture and violence, and survivor statements describing the same face. A phantom was moving through their city. But solving crimes across jurisdictions was complicated. Police departments rarely shared detailed information, and detectives had to navigate bureaucracy, ego, and political pressure. Yet Gil and Salerno persisted. They built a timeline, connected clues, and fought for resources. Meanwhile, the killer continued his nightly hunts, unaware that two determined investigators were slowly tightening the net around him. The detectives felt time slipping away. Every new report, every new victim, every horrific scene fueled their determination. They weren't just solving a case. They were racing against a predator who grew more dangerous with each passing night. The real battle had begun. By the summer of 1985, Los Angeles was suffocating under fear. The Night Stalker's attacks were becoming more frequent, more brutal, more unpredictable. New victims appeared almost weekly. Homes once considered sanctuaries now felt like traps. Families pushed heavy furniture against doors. People slept in shifts, some refusing to sleep at all. Gun stores sold out. Security companies couldn't keep up with demand. Police patrols increased, but the killers slipped through their lines like smoke. The news media amplified the terror. The term Night Stalker spread like wildfire, transforming the faceless killer into a legend of fear. Every whisper in the night, every creak of a floorboard sent families scrambling. Children were told not to look out windows. Women slept with phones clutched in trembling hands. Neighborhood watches formed, with residents patrolling streets carrying flashlights, crowbars, handmade weapons. The killer thrived in this fear. He wasn't just committing crimes. He was psychologically tormenting millions. The darkness he brought went beyond physical violence. It was emotional warfare. And the city was losing. The pressure on detectives was overwhelming. Public outrage grew with each attack. Politicians demanded answers. The media demanded results. But the killer offered no pattern to follow. He struck anywhere wealthy homes, poor communities, suburbs, city centers, quiet streets, crowded areas. His unpredictability was the ultimate weapon. Yet fear also brought unity. Communities that barely spoke to one another before now stood together. Strangers checked on strangers. People shared information, warned neighbors, stayed alert. Los Angeles, terrified as it was, began to fight back, not with weapons, but with vigilance. And that vigilance would eventually lead to the first major break in the case. Despite the killer's chaotic methods, he made mistakes. And detectives, exhausted yet determined, were ready to catch them. The most important clue was the Avia sneaker print. This print appeared at multiple crime scenes, each time confirming the same perpetrator. Detectives tracked down the shoe model and learned something shocking. Almost no one in Southern California owned that exact pair. This wasn't just a clue, it was a signature. Then came the game-changing discovery. A stolen car used in one of the Night Stalker's attacks was found abandoned. Inside, detectives recovered a fingerprint from the dashboard. When they ran it through their system, a name appeared: Richard Ramirez. It was the first time investigators had a face, a background, a history. Ramirez was a drifter, a drug addict, a thief. His criminal record revealed years of escalating violence and disturbing behavior. His childhood was riddled with trauma, abuse, and exposure to violence. Detectives realized they were dealing with someone shaped by chaos from the beginning. As they dug deeper, more details surfaced: reports of his obsession with dark symbols, stories of his violent outbursts, and a pattern of drifting from place to place like a man detached from reality. The fingerprint changed everything. Now the hunt had a direction. But detectives had to move carefully. If Ramirez realized the police were closing in, he would vanish. Or worse, he would become even more violent. The challenge now wasn't just identifying the killer. It was catching him before he struck again. And the killer was already on the move. Just as detectives were preparing for a quiet, strategic capture, disaster struck. A reporter leaked a crucial detail to the public: the Avia shoe print. It was supposed to be a secret weapon, evidence only detectives knew about. But now, overnight, it was broadcast across every news channel and printed in every newspaper. Detectives were furious. They knew exactly what would happen next. The killer would destroy the shoes, eliminating one of the main ties linking him to dozens of crimes. And he did. Ramirez threw away the shoes, leaving investigators struggling to compensate for the loss. The leak wasn't just a setback, it was a betrayal. It endangered the case, the public, and the detectives who had spent months connecting clues. The media frenzy intensified. The Night Stalker became a national obsession. Everywhere Ramirez went, people whispered, feared, suspected. The pressure grew unbearable. But something unexpected happened. Instead of disappearing, Ramirez spiraled into rage. He lashed out with even more brutality, committing new crimes driven by anger rather than stealth. His rage made him reckless. He left behind more evidence, made more mistakes, and those mistakes would ultimately seal his fate. The leak had almost destroyed the investigation. Instead, it pushed the Night Stalker to reveal himself. As police closed in, Ramirez grew desperate. He moved erratically across California, committing crimes, stealing cars, sleeping in alleys, drifting from city to city. He tried to kidnap victims, break into homes, and repeatedly failed as more people began recognizing him. His once shadowy presence was now exposed. Detectives monitored bus routes, checked motel sign-ins, and tracked stolen vehicles. Ramirez was still dangerous, but he was losing control. His desperation made him sloppy. One night, he attempted to steal a car, but was chased off by witnesses. Another day, he tried to purchase illegal drugs and was recognized by a dealer who'd seen his face on the news. Everyone was looking for him now: police, citizens, even criminals. The predator was no longer invisible. He was being hunted. Ramirez sensed time running out. He hopped from bus to bus, trying to flee to Arizona, but police had already alerted nearby states. Every time he stepped onto a street, he saw his own photograph staring back at him from newspaper stands. The once confident killer began to panic, and panic led him straight into the hands of the people he terrorized. On August 31st, 1985, Richard Ramirez stepped off a bus in East Los Angeles, unaware that the entire city now knew his face. When he walked into a small market, a woman outside recognized him and screamed. Panic shot through him as other bystanders turned to look. He bolted, running through the streets, jumping fences, sprinting through yards. But this time, the city didn't cower. It rose. Residents chased him, shouting warnings and calling police. A man hit Ramirez with a metal bar, knocking him to the ground. A crowd surrounded him, holding him down until officers arrived. The scene was unlike anything in true crime history. The citizens themselves had captured one of the most feared killers in modern America. Ramirez lay on the ground, bruised, shocked, defeated. For the first time, he felt the powerless terror he had inflicted on so many. When police arrived, he reportedly cried out, "It's me! It's me!" as if surrendering to the inevitable. The arrest wasn't just a victory for law enforcement. It was closure for millions who had lived in fear. The people of Los Angeles had taken back their city. Fear had finally changed sides. Ramirez's trial became a national spectacle. Courtrooms overflowed with reporters, onlookers, and even unsettling admirers drawn to his dark aura. Ramirez acted with arrogance, flashing pentagrams, shouting in court, smirking at victims' families. But behind the theatrics, the evidence was undeniable. Survivors testified with courage. Forensic scientists presented the damning connections: fingerprints, ballistic matches, stolen items, eyewitness accounts. The jury found him guilty on multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, sexual assault, and more. In 1989, Ramirez was sentenced to death. He responded with chilling indifference. To him, death meant nothing, but justice had been served. Ramirez spent decades on death row, aging into a hollow version of the monster he once was. In 2013, he died of complications from lymphoma, never facing execution. For some, it felt incomplete. For others, his death, slow, powerless, forgotten, was enough. The legacy of the Night Stalker is carved into the history of Los Angeles. It serves as a reminder of the darkness humans are capable of, but also the resilience and unity that can rise against it. The city survived. The people endured. And the night, once ruled by fear, returned to being just night. In the end, the Night Stalker's story is not just a chronicle of a killer who spread terror across California, but a testament to the strength of the very people he tried to break. For months, fear walked beside every family, crept through every neighborhood, and lived in the silence of every sleepless night. But fear did not win. It was met by detectives who refused to give up, survivors who refused to stay silent, and communities who refused to surrender their streets to darkness. In capturing Richard Ramirez, the people of Los Angeles proved something powerful, that even the most horrifying evil can fall when ordinary citizens stand together. The Night Stalker believed the shadows would always protect him, but in the end, it was the light of collective courage, vigilance, and unity that exposed him. His crimes left scars that may never fully heal, yet they also reshaped the city's spirit, reminding us that safety is something built not only by law enforcement but by neighbors who look out for one another. The echoes of his violence continue to remind us how fragile peace can be, but the victory over him reminds us how strong we truly are when we choose not to bow to fear. As the city's lights glow over quiet streets once again, they serve as a silent promise that darkness will always exist, but so will the people who rise to confront it. This is the final chapter of the Night Stalker's reign, and the enduring story of those who refuse to let terror define their lives.